Before he departed this world, DAngelo, the fiery soul of Neo Soul, left a confession that stunned the entire music world into silence. He didn't succumb to illness, but to a terrifying covenant between man and music, a force that consumed him little by little. In his final moments, he unveiled the horrifying truth about what truly destroyed him, a reality that even those closest to him dared not speak of. Before you join me as we delve deep into the final secret of DAngelo, what he himself called the price of sound. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can explore that absolute truth together. It all began with silence, a kind of silence that was suffocating. Not the quiet of a person resting after a long journey, but the stillness of a soul slowly withdrawing from this world moment by moment. DAngelo, the man who had captivated the world with music that was passionate and authentic to the bone, suddenly vanished from the public eye. No explanation, no official statement, only unanswered calls, unreturned messages, and contracts silently canceled. He disappeared from the stage, from the studio, from every place that had once been his breath. But even more disturbing was the feeling that he had disappeared from himself. Those close to DAngelo recounted that in his final months, he was no longer the man they knew. The artist who once burned brightly with his guitar, bursting with energy during every performance, now sat for hours in a darkened room, not speaking, not singing, not playing music. The windows were perpetually draped. Light rarely penetrated the thick fabric. Everything in the room was eerily still, only the sound of his slow, labored breathing mixing with the wind slipping through the curtain gap. A close friend who visited said DAngelo no longer wanted to see anyone, go outside, or even listen to music. He once said in a hoarse, exhausted voice, "Music can't save me anymore, it's imprisoning me." That statement sounded like a metaphor, but for DAngelo, it was his truth. He had always lived for music, but it was also because of music that he gradually lost everything: his freedom, his health, and ultimately his peace of mind. After Black Messiah, success brought no joy, only heightened fear. He told an old friend, "The light inside me is being drained day by day." Those nearest to him sensed something invisible yet incredibly heavy, as if he was shouldering a curse he couldn't articulate. His home in Richmond, which DAngelo once considered a sanctuary for creativity, now resembled a lonely fortress. Neighbors recounted that at night they often saw the studio light on, but heard no guitar, no drum beats, only a small, steady, low sound, a strange, inexplicable hum. A sound engineer who worked with him said that hum would sometimes appear in the studio when DAngelo was near the microphone, like an anomalous frequency that didn't belong to this world. Initially, everyone assumed a technical fault, but upon checking the equipment, everything was perfect. Only when DAngelo left the room did the sound vanish. On those nights, he would often sit motionless before his piano, his eyes fixed on the void. His manager recounted a night he called in a panic, saying someone was watching him through the sound. He claimed that every time he recorded his voice, he felt as if something was listening from the other side, not human, but a strange, deep, cold energy. He believed that music had become a bridge between two worlds where the souls of former artists still wandered, seeking redemption. Some dismissed it as delusion, but those who knew him best understood that DAngelo never spoke without reason. A close friend who stood by him since the beginning of his career recalled their last meeting in the hospital. "He looked at me," the friend said, his eyes deep and cloudy, and spoke slowly. "They want my soul, not my sound. I didn't understand. I thought he was delirious. But now I think back, perhaps he saw something we cannot." That statement became a haunting utterance, following everyone who had ever worked with DAngelo. No one dared speak of it publicly, but everyone knew that, in the music industry, some things defy rational explanation. Contracts, handshakes, exchanged promises. Sometimes they weren't just about money, but spiritual transactions. Fans believed a prolonged illness caused his decline, but in the closed circles of industry insiders, people whispered that he had touched something he shouldn't have. Rumors of a sacrifice in music began to circulate. DAngelo once said, "If music is what saves the world, then who saves the person who creates it?" That quote, from a conversation with Questlove years ago, carried prophetic weight no one recognized at the time. As time passed, the Richmond house grew quieter. No more friends visited, no more sound of the guitar, no more soulful voice that made the world pause. DAngelo spoke less, ate less, and barely slept. On some nights, the housekeeper recounted, he would sit from dusk till dawn, scribbling illegible notes in his notebook, strange symbols, unfinished music fragments, and phrases like, "The light is running out, unpurified soul, the sound is distorting." A visiting psychologist advised hospitalization for nervous exhaustion, but he refused, saying, "My ailment isn't in my mind, it's in the frequency." DAngelo increasingly drifted from reality. He talked to himself or to someone no one else saw. In a few remaining audio fragments, he is heard whispering in the studio, "I can feel them. They're still here. They never leave." That statement sent shivers down anyone's spine because his voice no longer sounded normal. It was weak yet urgent, as if pleading for release from something unseen. In his eyes, people saw the despair of an artist sensing the imminent end, not just of himself, but of the world he believed in. The silence that enveloped DAngelo did not linger in peace. It was like the calm before a storm, a tempest that didn't come from the sky but from within his mind. People claimed he was battling illness, but those who truly knew him understood illness was not the only enemy. Something else was draining him daily, an invisible, cold hand strangling his spirit. Starting in early 2025, rumors began to spread among close musicians. DAngelo believed he was haunted by negative energy from a group of industry figures, those who, in his words, want to hold on to the artist's soul to fuel their own fame. These statements sounded like superstition, but those who witnessed his change felt genuine fear. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. His gaze was always fixed on an empty point, as if looking right through the person opposite him. On some nights, he called a close friend, his voice trembling. "They're here. You can't see them, but I can feel them." An old friend, a former member of the Soulquarians, recalled, DAngelo started talking about a circle of power. He believed that some people in this industry manipulate energy, not metaphorically, but literally. They know how to keep him weak to exploit his emotions for music. Many scoffed, thinking it was the hallucination of a sick man, but others stayed silent because they had heard similar stories. DAngelo's increasingly bizarre behavior worried everyone. He carried a string of wooden beads around his neck, saying, "It's the only way to keep my energy from being sucked out." Once, while recording, he suddenly threw his headphones down and shouted, "This sound is wrong." "Who changed my frequency?" Everyone in the studio fell silent. The equipment was fine. He was the only one who perceived the difference, and that sent chills down everyone's spine. Starting in early 2025, rumors began to spread among close musicians. DAngelo believed he was haunted by negative energy from a group of industry figures, those who, in his words, wanted to hold on to the artist's soul to fuel their own fame. These statements sounded like mere superstition, but for those who witnessed his change, they felt a genuine fear. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and his gaze was always fixed on an empty point, as if looking right through the person opposite him. On some nights, he called a close friend, his voice trembling. "They're here. You can't see them, but I can feel them." An old friend, a former member of the Soulquarians, recalled, DAngelo started talking about a circle of power. He believed that some people in this industry manipulate energy, not metaphorically, but literally. They know how to keep him in a state of weakness to exploit his emotions for music. Many scoffed, thinking it was the hallucination of a sick man, but others remained silent because they had heard similar stories. DAngelo's increasingly bizarre behaviors worried everyone. He carried a string of wooden beads always worn around his neck, saying, "It's the only way to keep my energy from being sucked out." Once, while recording, he suddenly threw his headphones down and shouted, "This sound is wrong. Who changed my frequency?" Everyone in the studio fell silent as all the equipment was functioning normally. He was the only one who perceived the difference, and that sent a chill down everyone's spine. A sound engineer who worked with DAngelo recounted, every time he walked into the room, the system consistently emitted a low hum. At first, we thought it was the power source, but after thorough checking, there were no faults. So we nicknamed it the hum, the strange low sound that only appeared when DAngelo was present. It felt like an electromagnetic energy, but it wasn't coming from any equipment. I don't believe in the supernatural, but I heard it with my own ears. The story of the hum spread rapidly among sound technicians in New York and Richmond. Some argued it was normal noise interference, but others quietly suggested that some artists carry their own frequency, and when that frequency is disrupted, their body goes awry too. DAngelo believed that. He told his manager, "Sound is energy, and energy, when distorted, can kill a person." During his final recording session, no one forgot the moment he uttered a chilling statement, "This music will be my sacrifice." No one dared to respond. No one knew if he was serious or joking, but everyone felt a strange atmosphere fill the room, a kind of silence as heavy as lead, making those present just want to step outside to breathe. When the recording finished, he sat frozen, his hand trembling as he touched the piano keys. His face was pale, dotted with cold sweat. "Are you tired?" the engineer asked. He just shook his head gently and said in a very low voice, "It's not my body, they are taking my energy." It is said that after that recording session, DAngelo rarely left the house. He avoided contact with strangers, even asking his manager to install mirrors everywhere in the room, claiming that the reflected light made him dizzy. A strange detail mentioned by relatives was that every time he walked past a mirror, his reflection seemed to be half a beat slow, lagging behind his real movement. Although it might have been only a sensation for a man who believed in energy, it was enough to cause panic. DAngelo's private doctor, who monitored him for months, admitted something was amiss. His body weakened faster than normal, but the lab results couldn't explain why. He seemed to be depleted from within, as if his life force was being slowly withdrawn. Once, the doctor asked if he wanted to be hospitalized for monitoring. DAngelo smiled softly and said, "Doctor, you can't cure this. This isn't an illness." Friends began to fear for him. They tried to pull him out of his obsession, but all efforts were futile. One night, Questlove called him, wanting to invite him to play drums like they used to. He didn't refuse, but only said one sentence, "If I pick up the sticks, I'll be calling them over." When Questlove asked who them was, DAngelo didn't answer. He just smiled, a weary, heartbreakingly sad smile. Since voodoo, DAngelo had always spoken about devotion in music, that to touch the audience's soul, the artist must leave a piece of their own soul behind in every song. But now he seemed to believe he had given away too much, to the point where there was nothing left to keep. A relative recounted, he believed a part of his soul was trapped in the recordings. Every time he listened to them, he felt weaker. This story astonished many in the industry, but it also reminded them. Many artists have claimed they hear themselves trapped in the song, an artistic metaphor for creative exhaustion. For DAngelo, it was no longer a metaphor. Towards the end, he became increasingly withdrawn. Some recalled that he often sat in the dark, listening to his old music and muttering, "Every note is a part of me. I let them go too far." One night, he sent a close friend a message, just a few words. "If I don't wake up tomorrow, delete all the unfinished tracks." The message chilled the recipient, but when they called back, he had turned off his phone. Everyone who met DAngelo during that time described the same thing: his gaze, a strange, deep, and distant look, as if he had seen something others could not. Some said it was the look of a person who saw the ultimate truth. Others said it was the look of a soul that had already departed before the body could follow. What happened to DAngelo in his final months remains a mystery no one can explain. But one thing is certain, he was not just fighting an illness, he was fighting an invisible force. Perhaps the pressures of fame, perhaps the shadows in the music industry, or perhaps, as he believed, the mysterious energy that had encompassed him for so long. No one knows exactly what transpired in DAngelo's final hours, only that the air in his small Richmond home that day was thick, dense, and so quiet one could hear their own heartbeat. The atmosphere felt compressed, as if the small house held a secret the world was not ready to receive. A studio technician present that morning recounted that DAngelo looked profoundly different, thin, exhausted, but his eyes were unusually bright, so bright they made the observer uneasy. He walked into the studio, didn't greet anyone, and only said softly, "I need to record something, just a short piece." No one asked further. No one dared to ask further. They all knew DAngelo when he entered that state, the state he called dialogue with the music. The technical crew retreated, leaving him alone. He sat down, staring at the microphone as if into a mirror, then pressed the record button. The first sound emitted was not a voice, but a breath, long, deep, heavy. Then, in a murky voice, he spoke slowly, word by word. "It wasn't the illness that took me. It was the deal I made with the music." The studio staff recalled that at that moment, no one dared to move. The entire room seemed to freeze. That statement, if taken out of context, might be seen as the metaphor of an artist who loved his craft enough to neglect himself. But those who lived in DAngelo's world understood it wasn't just a metaphor. He believed music was not inanimate. To him, it had a soul and allure, the ability to grant blessings and also to consume its creator. A close friend recounted that a few days earlier, DAngelo had said, "Music is a living entity, not a tool. I nourished it with my soul, and now it's claiming the debt." That statement sounded like artistic philosophy. But looking at what he went through, the isolation, exhaustion, the fear of being monitored, people began to understand that for him, musical energy was not just inspiration, but a genuine, tangible force. The engineer who preserved the voice note recounted that after that sentence, DAngelo paused for about 10 seconds, then continued in a low voice, almost a whisper. "They think it's cancer. It's not. It's the frequency. It's been off for too long." He believed that the frequency, which only he could perceive, had been disrupted, causing his body to fail. For a long time, he was obsessed with correcting the energy, saying that if the frequency didn't match, the music would turn against the person. It sounded irrational, but that was exactly how DAngelo lived, a man who viewed music not as a job, but as a sacred connection between man and the cosmos. After finishing the voice note, he left the studio without a word. The technical staff saw him standing on the porch, eyes closed, his hands still placed on his chest as if checking his heartbeat. When they asked if he needed help, he only said softly, "The music is still ringing in my head." Then he smiled, a weary but strangely peaceful smile, the kind of serenity of someone who has accepted something irreversible. That afternoon, DAngelo wrote the final lines in the notebook left on his piano. The handwriting was scrawled, slightly shaky but clear enough to read. "Everything comes with a price, and now I know what mine is." No one knows in what state he wrote that sentence, despair, regret, or acceptance. But just a few hours later, he was found still in his studio, the lights still on, the cup of water unfinished, and the song "Really Love" still playing on repeat. The official news later stated that DAngelo passed away after a long battle with illness, but those close to him didn't believe it. They said he was healthier than usual a few days prior, even planning to re-record an old track. A friend commented, "He showed no signs of being about to leave, but he seemed to know it beforehand." And what haunted them most was that voice note, the last message, which the family later requested to be kept private. Nevertheless, a secret copy of the recording was retained. Listeners recount that DAngelo's voice in it was unlike his living voice. It was heavy, almost distorted, as if multiple layers of sound were stacked upon it. And at the 46-second mark, after he spoke his final sentence, a strange sound was heard like a breath mixed with the subtle vibration of a guitar string. When the frequency was amplified, some experts claimed it was noise interference. But the engineer who was there insisted, no, that wasn't a technical error. It was another voice, very quiet, speaking at the same time as him. A male voice whispering, "He's ready." Hearing that, people felt a chill. But no one dared to elaborate, because everyone in this industry understood some things are best left untouched. The last sentence, a relative heard from him before he drifted into his faded sleep, was recounted by his manager. "Tell them I finally understand what Marvin meant by the price of sound." No one knows who Marvin was here. Most believe he was referencing Marvin Gaye, his greatest idol, who once said that music was a blessing and a burden at the same time. But others believe it was a different metaphor, Marvin as a symbol for the Black artists who had to trade their souls to maintain their voice in a harsh industry where beauty and pain always walk hand in hand. Relatives recalled that a few days after his passing, they reopened the piano in the studio just to test if the keys still worked. But when they touched it, they heard the hum, the strange low sound that had persisted throughout DAngelo isolated period. This time it resonated softly, steadily, like a heartbeat. A young engineer burst into tears, stammering, "It's like he's still here, just not in body anymore." No one knows what truly killed DAngelo, illness, loneliness, or the conviction that he had given his entire soul to music. But one thing is certain, he never viewed music as a mere tool. To him, it was a covenant, a sacred link between the living and lost souls. And when that covenant was complete, perhaps he simply returned to where the music originated, a place free of suffering, free of distorted frequencies, where every melody is perfect. It is said that when a great artist departs, the world loses their sound. But with DAngelo, that sound was never lost. It still rings out quietly and persistently, like his final confession, a sad symphony for the price of absolute devotion.